So we're here in Assisi with the Sisters of the Atonement for Holy Week. It's Monday in Holy Week this afternoon, and I'm delighted to be accompanying our Anglican chaplain, Jonathan Lloyd, a very good friend of mine, and to meet this afternoon with Sister Sue, who has come to us to Assisi from somewhere closer to my home. Tell us about that, Sister Sue. Where was home and how did you end up in Assisi?
Thank you, Andrew. My home of birth, of origin, is Vancouver, Canada, and most of my formative years were spent in Vancouver. And during the latter part of my adolescence and young adulthood, I would have met the Sisters of the Atonement in Vancouver town, Cordova Street, East Cordova.
Okay.
And shared in their ministry among the poor.
Wonderful. So you're right in the heart of, yes, there is such a need, isn't there?
That's
right.
right.
A very Franciscan presence to have. So you started that very early in your years. You discovered a draw towards your vocation.
A draw, yes, in my young teen years, yes, and
wonderful.
Later adolescence, and confirmed again as a young adult. And as in all of our callings, confirmed and re-embraced on a daily basis.
Absolutely, that's right. We're converted every day of our lives, aren't we?
That's right.
We have that need. I came out to Canada in 1982. I started life in England and Scotland, and I was drawn at different times towards a Franciscan sense of vocation, and of course it was on Vancouver Island that I became a companion, and Jonathan became a tertiary of the Franciscans. So coming to Assisi has got a special connection for me.
It is our spiritual home, isn't it?
It is.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing that home with ourselves here in Assisi, and in your centers, your homes of ministry as well.
Thank you. And one thing that's been very much on our minds in recent weeks has been, in fact years now, the question of our relationship between the settler peoples in Canada and the First Nations, the Métis, the Inuit. Our whole relationship seems so fraught with difficulties. There's such a need for repentance and healing and reconciliation. How is that? I'm wondering, how does that come over all these thousands of miles away in Europe, and yet very present with Pope Francis meeting with these delegations? How has that conversation been going among your own community here? How does that speak to you?
It certainly sears all of our hearts, and for those of us who in our early formations have had personal contact and personal relationships with the First Native peoples, it does sear and it does break open our hearts again. For those of us who have been transferred to other parts of the world, it helps us to look at our peoples of origin and at our peoples who are coming in on our shores, and how we embrace one another and live together as one. To follow the encounter of these past weeks at Rome has been very moving as well, to listen to the stories and to talk with first-hand ministers like yourselves who are ministering today in this ongoing healing process has been very moving. To hear the elders having their voices heard, and also the youngers in the families to be a part of that healing family process. And also to see the humility in those of us who have failed terribly in the past, and to live lives of reparation and conversion, and to be part of that atoning aspect, that reconciling aspect, and also to claim our own culpa and to ask forgiveness
No, I think that's so essential. Thank you so much, Sister Sue,
Thank you, Andrew.
for sharing that. I'm sure there's 1,001 stories to be told. I know in our own parish we've had people who in past years were very closely related to residential schools as teachers. I have a 108-year-old woman in my parish who taught. She's the oldest living graduate of the University of British Columbia, 1933, and her first job was a girls' matron in a residential school. So I interviewed her last year about that, but it was again a time of such complexity, and she lasted a very short time in that structure. Just thinking of the last 2 years as well, our whole lives have been shaped by pandemic. If I could just move on to that question. And I wonder how that has affected you directly in the house here. What has been different for you?
Thank you. To live a life of enclosure, we've had these past 2 years, closing the doors to travelers and pilgrims and strangers, those in need of a house of welcome, and to be that for one another in our small communities, in our small families, and many of us living intergenerationally. So it's been a rich time in terms of giving personal time to one another, and also learning new ways to reach out to those around us. Zoom, for example, in ongoing meetings and connections with family, religious and personal, but also to be attentive as we go out into the open space of Assisi to those too who are beginning to venture out of their homes now after 2 years, to the small courtesies, the basic skills, human skills, have come back very, very simply, and hopefully will help in the ongoing openness and healing process among all of us, particularly in small communities where persons can be neglected, For us, as a church, it's helped us to be more creative and personal in our liturgies, and also to be more creative, to be more inviting, and to look at new ways of sharing the gospel and the good news. A part of the difficulty has been not to be able to walk with people in their grieving because of the limitations in numbers, but also to show our accompaniment in small gestures.
So does this mean phone calls?
That's right, phone calls and visiting the homes where we can, but there have been many limitations, and connecting with the family members who are beginning to re-emerge, the younger people in the families, to take the good news home to their elders.
Yes. Do you see, now you mentioned a little earlier about, psychologists working with young people.
Yes.
Do you see that young people who've been deprived of schooling and socialization having a particular impact on them mentally, psychologically, through being really forced to do things that are not natural for their age?
Yes.
Being confined so much.
There's been a lot of hidden depression, and this is what these skilled professionals are trying to help with. And many of us, just by simple gestures of listening and taking time to acknowledge one another by name. Again, it's those simple human basic skills that all of us grew with. And they can be bridges for one another, psychological and spiritual. So that is our what we're trying to do now, and collaborate with one another. Different helping personnel. So it's a support intergenerational, and for the young person and the parent, if there's a parent figure there, and the grandparent.
I know it's so complex, and I always have a mask at hand in my top pocket because I'm always wondering, 1 meter, 2 meters.
Yes.
Is this a situation where I put it on or take it off, and what is the appropriate response? So
Yes.
I appreciate that we can be in front of a camera where we can see your smiling face.
Yours is contagious. And Jonathan.
Jonathan, do you have a question for Sister Sue today?
Oh, I'm just enjoying being here, and it's wonderful to be back in Assisi and to be part of the challenge of God's calling for the future, and the world has changed. And we haven't mentioned Ukraine, of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is so shocking.
Yeah.
And the lament that we're all feeling, and the sorrow,
Yes.
and the surprise, and it's the first time in many people's lifetimes that they've seen war, but it's the first time we've seen war which is so visual in terms of media.
Yes.
And this is Europe.
Yes.
Yes.
And Russia and Ukraine are both Orthodox Christian countries.
Yes.
I have a very close link with the Orthodox Church near where I am in England, and they said our church is tearing itself apart.
Mm.
And of course there are many Catholic communities in Ukraine too.
Yes.
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 So this is part of us.
It is.
I'm
It is.
curious to know, we talk about the visual nature of it in a world of media, and you're using Zoom and so forth. In past times, in sort of cloistered life, pre-television, we were, or for all of us, wherever we were kind of, whatever you read in the newspaper was what you saw. But now it's in front of us. So is that part of your daily life, that watching images on the news and being fully informed, as many of us, I feel, is one of the things I have to find this balance between being a priest and knowing and being able to pray intelligently, and yet also not being overwhelmed by violent images. How do you handle that as a community and as sisters?
Because that really, Andrew, is the same creative tension for all of us right now. And challenging one another prior to bedding down at night, not to follow the news at the last moment.
Right.
Which interferes with that time of night contemplation and sleep. And one can become sleep deprived and live in constant constant anxiety. Yes, so we choose a time when we're going to watch the national news, and we're going to take that to prayer and then do some action. So the charities in this area has chosen, each area has received so many and is receiving so many Ukrainian families. Of course, they are families that are diminished, primarily mothers and children.
Yes.
And it's the same. There's a gentleman here from Dublin, and he needed to take Holy Week and Easter away because he works in the center of Dublin, and they're just two different cultures. The Ukraine culture and the Irish culture, so they're learning at the same time as we are too. Here in the parish, we've prepared a small apartment for a mother and 2 children, and so that is ready. It's still, we are waiting for the arrival. So things are being put in place to receive and offer hospitality. Our concern now in the ecumenical front is the relationship within the Orthodox communion. And there's strong division right now and strong condemnation between the different branches of Orthodox tradition. And the immediate one, of course, is the Russian and the Ukraine, the Greek now, and others. So to pray for healing within that family as well. Our hearts go out to the many young Russians that are losing their lives as well. And their lives, even after death, are not respected. And so their families are deprived. For many of them, it's the mother figure of their sons coming home, even their corpses. They are not going home.
Yeah.
And the violence now that is happening in the bombing.
No.
Yeah, so it's really changed our way of living and being present and not being perpetrators of violence ourselves. It's
Thank you.
tough discernment. Thank you.
It's affirming as well as the continual challenge about that balance that we need to maintain between absorbing information.
Yes.
That is Jonathan's phone going off, incidentally. This is live and fun.
Assisi's office.
It could be the office of the bishop, yes, exactly. So don't want to miss it.
That's right. That's true. Thank you for bringing that up again about balance. It's so important.
Everything is about finding that place, that creative tension. Thank you for using that word as well. And I find that over these whole past 2 years, everything is short-term planning, unknown ministry, and it's just as exhausting to do ministry into a camera while you carry all of these things as it is in previous times when you were interacting with people all the time. But it's not shared in the same way, and that's part of the challenge.
Yes.
Certainly, I know I'm just going on to Madeira next to our community there for a little bit of holiday after Easter, and we have a Russian violinist in the community, and he offered a Ukrainian support concert. So he offered a concert for everyone to raise funds for Ukrainian refugees, and I know they're going there. And when I get back, I'm anticipating that the same questions will be laid out in front of us of how many Ukrainian refugees we can take, because we are the largest diaspora in Canada of Ukrainians outside of Ukraine. So we carry the burden of these immediate, intense and violent realities around us, at the same time as our deep Franciscan identification with a suffering world at all levels of creation. I wonder how this, we were on a course towards dealing with climate crisis and climate change, and then we're swept away at one level by other world events, viruses and wars. How do we also maintain our vision for the deeper integrity of creation, which is also being compromised and hurt so much? And how does that conversation carry on among you as well?
World Earth Day is coming up, eh?
Yes, yeah.
This month, and that's a cause for us to pause and to reflect and to stand on Sister Earth gently. And to look at the ways that we can continue to renew and be a part of that renewal process naturally and spiritually and emotionally with all of these issues. The common sharing of our responsibility, being good stewards, looking at all of our world as a gift, and walking gently.
I love that phrase.
On the earth.
And I think that brings us right back to where we began, that really if we can tap into the wisdom of the First Nations traditions, we will find that there are ways for thousands of years that people have walked gently in many parts of the world that we can learn from. So anyway, in that onward hope of a journey of reconciliation with First Nations, with deep gratitude that Jonathan and I can be here in Assisi, and for this little moment to be together, I'll say in the tradition of our many First Nations, all my relations, and peace and all good to you. Thank you so much, sisters.
Thank you kindly, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thank you kindly, Jonathan.
Thank you.